Proceedings in Finance Committee, considering the appropriations to the Minister for Financial Services, Commerce and Environment, and in particular those to the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority. Please be seated. Before we took the lunch break, we were about to consider MOA 12, Regulation of the Financial Services Industry for $3,310,000. I believe that some members may be willing to consider all of the appropriations together for the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority. Am I correct in my assumption? Mr. McLean? Since we can't get a consensus on that then, or even anyone to acknowledge. Okay, fair enough. So we will consider the three appropriations together. MOA 12, MOA 13, MOA 14.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, the Monetary Authority. Does the Monetary Authority consider that it has a full staff complement according to its workload and needs?
Mr. McLean, we're on page 175.
Mr. Chairman, I better repeat the question.
Yes, sir.
I'm asking, does the Monetary Authority consider that it has a full staff complement according to its workload and needs?
Mr. Pannon.
Mr. Chairman, I will let the Deputy Managing Director for Operations respond on that.
Mr. Chairman, through you, we have not yet achieved optimum resource levels. We take the risk-based approach to regulation, which guides the focus of various resources in regards to our regulation of the financial industry. But certainly we are at no way to the level that it's needed for the regulation of the financial industry in a very robust way.
Mr. Chairman, can the Director say what is outstanding, if he can, and how many of those are most pertinent, or that he would say are priority in regards to the operations and expectations of the Monetary Authority by the private sector?
Mr. Chairman, we have approximately 25 vacancies at this time, and approximately 5 or 7 of them are senior, which would be critical to the recruitment process at CIMA. At this point, we have 173 staff, 152 Caymanian, so we're at 88% Caymanian at this point, but we do have a number of vacancies.
So you have 25 vacancies, Mr. Chairman, 25 vacancies, 5 of which you think are critical importance? Did you say 5?
That's right, they're more senior positions.
What can you say what those positions are? What areas, if not direct responsibility, what areas that you would need them to cover?
One is a Deputy Managing Director of Supervision. One also that we're recruiting for is the Head of Insurance Financial Services. We have 2 Chief P&D Officers, which is the Policy and Development Officers. And we have 2 Senior Analysts and investments.
So 2 policy chiefs.
Yes, and all 25 are actively being recruited. We have various methods, which is domestic and international in regards to domestic agencies and contacts, and also international.
So the 25 vacancies are now in recruitment stage, that's what you're saying?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So the deputy in supervision, the head of insurance, and the 2 policy chiefs, you said, and there was another one that is of critical importance. You said 5, and that's 4.
The Deputy Managing Director of Supervision.
No, deputy you said first, head of insurance, then 2 policy chiefs.
And two deputy of insurance.
I see, so that's the 5.
Yes.
And that's the critical 5 you're talking about. But
Yes,
you're
Mr.
into recruitment stage for them, both on island and off overseas.
Right, in the process of shortlisting now for interviews.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I note in the page 175 on regulation of the financial services industry, the vote forecasted 2013-14, 11.3 million, and 2014-15, the budget at 3.3 million. You want to explain how that comes about?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, I'd like to thank the member for the question. Firstly, let me clarify I should have pointed this out earlier when we first started discussing this head. The number for the 13-14 forecast is incorrect. That should be 6.310 rather than 11.310.
Oh.
The 11.310 is the amount for 12-13.
12-13.
Yes. So the current budget item is 6.310. The difference between the 12-13 and the 14-15 is accounted for in relation to the director's registry, the revenue element, which is entity revenue for the Monetary Authority, coming under the director's registration and licensing law. So there's additional entity revenue that's coming into the Monetary Authority in respect of that, and on that basis, a reduction in the amount under this head was made by 3 million, a reduction of 3 million.
So this, I don't know what you're calling it. I mean, there's a difference of if you're saying it's 6. So these figures are wrong. There would need to be corrections in this document, Mr. Chairman. You're saying that the 2014-15 is 3.3. The 2013 and 14 is 6 million.
That's correct. 6.310.
The difference in 3 million, you're saying you're going to get that from the revenue that's coming in. How are you making that up?
There's entity revenue that is coming. All of the revenue which arises under the new Directors Registration and Licensing Law is entity revenue for the Monetary Authority. So on that basis, we reduced the amount of the contribution to the Monetary Authority in respect of this head by 3 million. So last year it was 6,310,000. Sorry, this current year we're still finishing up now, 6,310,000, and for the 14-15 year, it is going to be 3,310,000.
But even though it's coming in somewhere else, shouldn't it be budgeted here as 6 million? If that's going to be the figure? Because if you got 3 million, obviously, what you're saying to us on the first outlook is that you don't have enough funding. But in fact, you do have enough funding, at least you plan to, because you plan to use 3 million more of revenue from from your revenue base. But shouldn't that be shown here? I would think if you're going to spend it, so where is it shown then?
Well, Mr. Chair, through you, this, I assume that perhaps in the following budget, this may be the subject of a note in terms of the additional income that the Monetary Authority has versus the costs of providing these services. But at this point, this is the cost that is being reduced in terms of this particular output that's being purchased because
No, but
of the compensation.
You can't say that it's being, Mr. Chairman, I think as the finance minister, you need to have to help us out here.
Mr. Bush and Mr. Panton, if you turn to the purchase agreement on page 18.
Ownership agreement?
Purchase agreement. On page 1,
Price is bigger than United States.
Purchase or ownership?
the purchase agreement.
Page, Mr. Chairman, sorry, page,
Page 186, sorry, 186.
186.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yes, Mr. Chairman, and that's what I was asking, whether whether the extra $3 million is accounted elsewhere. Now, while that's in the purchase agreement, the actual budget, which, Mr. Chairman, is the annual plan and estimate, is still showing $3 million, and you're going to spend $6 million. So how is that accounted for then, Mr. Chairman, in your balances and in making the budget 15, 20, 60, whatever the amount is, surplus, and so on? How is that accounted in the budget then? Because the budget statement, if you follow what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, and where I'm not understanding it, perhaps you can explain it to me. The budget is saying 3.3. That's your budget. That's what we can pass. Your purchase agreement, which the cabinet is purchasing from the entity. That's what these purchase agreements are. The cabinet is purchasing so much from whatever entity we're talking about, if I understand the whole system correctly. And this, in this instance, we're purchasing $6 million from, which we have to provide from the Monetary Authority. So I'm trying to find out, there seems to be some gap in the whole matter of the budget.
Mr. Bush, while they are conferring there, perhaps the quick and simple explanation is that with the introduction of the director's registration fees, that is actually entity revenue that will go directly to the Monetary Authority.
No, Mr. Chairman, I understand that. What I'm not clear on, I understand that it's revenue, $3 million revenue that you propose to get and give to the Monetary Authority, or that will be accounted for the Monetary Authority's $6 million that they need to spend. But your budget is still only showing $3 million. And so that difference needs to be accounted for. Now, you're the accountant, I'm not, I'm just a layman, but I'm trying to decipher in my mind how do we account then in the budget for an expenditure of $6 million?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not trying to interfere. I just remember the situation with the NRA and how they were funded directly from an income. And I'm not so sure there's any correlation there, but if you think about it, there may be. Also, it's 6 and 3, I know, But if it's $3 million of revenue, which is going to balance one side of the equation plus 3, it will show up. It has to show on both sides.
Mr. Chair.
This is how the NRA is funded with their but that's not their capital side. That's their operational side of it. They are funded directly from the tax from fuel. I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm just wondering if there's any correlation between the two.
In principle, yes, but Mr. Chair, through you, it appears that the error, which is reflected in the AP&E on page 175, is also similarly, perhaps not in the exact amount, but reflected in the purchase agreement. So, in fact, it's the amount that's shown on page 186 of the purchase agreement is supposed to be the same 3,310,000 rather than 6,310,000 as it is shown.
So, and the purchase agreement is still equal to what is being budgeted in the budget, because this is the actual budget on page 175, and that's what you're saying.
So, Mr. Bush, if I understand it correctly, what's happening is that the overall cost to SEMA hasn't declined, but government will now only purchase the $3,310,000 as reflected in the purchase agreement and shown there in the 2014-2015 column. But the remainder of the expenditure for SEMA will be funded through the direct revenue that they will receive from the director's registration fees. So that wouldn't be reflected in the budget, because that's direct entity revenue. So we wouldn't see that in these documents.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, how was it accounted for last year?
Well, last year, the regulation, the director's registration fees were not in place. So that's why you saw in the 13-14 column, the 6,310,000.
Never mind. Never mind the new revenue. New revenue is coming in, but the Monetary Authority always had revenue. So there is some gap in this that I am not seeing, not clearly, and certainly budget 13 said to be 2 point something, made up maybe to whatever they're saying was for 2012-13, for 2013-14, our budget said 5.3. So I'm still left now. Possible answers are what Mr. Tibbet chimed in to say, that it's something similar to the NRA. But I don't know if the minister agrees with that. That is similar, because I was told I was wrong, you know. But now, when you get to what Mr. Tibbet said, I was told point blank a year, 2 years ago, that was the wrong type of accounting. Now, I don't know if they're doing the same thing, but perhaps this government wants to say it's not the same thing. But I'm trying to decipher, how do you have $3.3 million one place, the other side of it? And so I don't know, Mr. Chairman, in your full accounting for the budget, how that accounts for. Yes, I understand that you got revenue coming in, and you'll be able to use the revenue, but still you need to show it. At SEMA, yes. When I said, yeah, it's SEMA, but that everybody's expenditure is in this document. Am I not correct? Everybody's, that's what we've been examining.
Just the element that's being funded by the government. The direct entity revenue would be reflected in SEMA's annual report, where it would be reflected in the accounts as director's fees or whatever the term would be. So that's where the extra $3-4 million would be reflected.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman, that I understand that I had that law prepared and we were going to get that amount of money. I remember all of that. What I am saying is that this document is showing different figures from what you're saying. Am I not right?
Well, let's look at it.
The 11.3 is not right according to the minister.
Correct.
Okay, so
That's-
there needs to be some changes anyway
So
into
that's
this document.
So that's six. So column 2013-14 forecast would be amended to read 6,310,000 as opposed to 11,310,000. And then the 2014-15 budget column is 3,310,000. So there's a reduction there of $3 million. The budget figure is reflected in the purchase agreement. So that's what the government is budgeting to purchase services from SEMA. So that's the 3,310,000 reflected on page 186 of the purchase agreement. Now, as to where the
3 or 6?
3,
So that is wrong also then.
that should be 3,310,000.
Instead of 6 million, that is 3.
That should be 3.
Bearing in mind that that's not the total expenditure now.
Correct. Now
The total expenditure is going to be minimum of 6.
the total expenditure will then, the total expenditure for SEMA would be funded through direct entity revenue plus this 3,310,000 that is being appropriated to, that's being paid to SEMA through the purchase agreement. That's now as to what the exact figures are that SEMA would incur. Otherwise, this budget would only show what government is purchasing from SEMA. The other revenue and expenditure for SEMA would be reflected in their annual accounts. What's the report called?
The annual financial, or the ownership agreement?
Or their annual report?
But we're not
Or
going
the
to
ownership agreement?
we're not going to show that in the annual plan and estimates. That's what you're saying, Mr. Chairman. The expenditures going to go up too.
Ownership.
So, and I should say this, so that when the monetary authority does spend more, we're not going to see glaring audits or this thing and the next thing saying that they spent but they never had permission. That's why I'm trying to get to the bottom of this showing one thing and actually expending something else.
That wouldn't be the case, Mr. Bush, in the sense that it would only reflect in our expenditure what was appropriated to them. Their expenditure isn't otherwise constrained with our expenditure limits.
Mr. Chairman, if I could refer the member to page 131 of the ownership agreement in respect of SEMA. That sets out the forecast operating statement. It sets out the revenue and operating expenses. Actual for 12-13, the forecast for 13-14, and the budget for 14-15. And you will see that the aggregate operating revenue inclusive of the estimate for directors' fees, SEMA transaction fees, investment income, other income is $23,190,000 500, and the operating expenses is 21,465,500 for a surplus of 1,725,000. So, in respect of the services and outputs under MOE 12, those are not necessarily as you pointed out correctly, sir, those are not necessarily the costs of providing those services, but that's the amount that the government is providing the Monetary Authority to provide those services in addition to the entity revenue which has been given under the new Directors Registration and Licensing Law.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not, not going to take it any further. There's still some dust around, but I leave it, and I can talk to you off finance committee just to make sure that I'm
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Bush. Are there any further questions? Are there any further questions? Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the Deputy Managing Director said he had 3 posts vacant in the insurance section. One was the head and 2 deputies. Are all of those positions vacant, or is one of those being occupied by somebody who's sick? And for how long has he been sick?
Mr. Chairman, through you, sir, the previous head of insurance is no longer employed by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, and we do have someone in there temporarily who was previously a head of the insurance division, and as I said, we are actively recruiting for a replacement at this time, plus 2 deputies also.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. Are there any further questions? Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, the head now, the temporary head is someone who had left and was brought back in?
Mr. Chairman, yes, had left some years ago and has been returned on a temporary basis, contractual basis.
And so why are we still hunting a head? Or hunting a head person?
She is just there temporarily. She just accepted a temporary contract with us.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Minister Deputy Director can tell us how long this gentleman was sick before we found out his true complaint.
Mr. Borden or Mr. Pandon?
Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Chairman, through you, the individual was on sick leave in accordance with SEMA sick leave policy. He was on sick leave for 6 months, which was 3 months paid, 3 months half paid. And at the end of that 6-month period, he was terminated.
Mr. McLean? Mr. Mark Taggart?
Thank Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Deputy Director. Can you say if it is expected that they will have a permanent replacement for the Director of Insurance by the expiration of the temporary employee?
Mr. Chairman, that seems to be the position at this point. We do have some candidates that seems to fit the various requirements, and as I said, we have them shortlisted and we'll go through the interview process.
Mr. Conley?
Mr. Chairman, through you, could the Deputy Managing Director say if there are any Caymanians in that shortlist?
Mr. Chairman, there are. I can't recall at this point how many, but there are.
Sorry, are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, then we'll proceed to take the vote. So, all those in favor of MOA 12, regulation of the financial services industry, $3,310,000. MOA 13, assistance to overseas regulatory authorities, $980,000. MOA 14, policy advice and ministerial services for $875,000. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Turning now to consider appropriation NGS 74.
This is 470, it's not 214. Mr. Chair, rather than doing it at the end of a question, let me just clarify up front in relation to this heading that unfortunately there is another error reflected in the 12, 13, 14 numbers under this heading, NGS 74. The amount shown is $214,089, and in fact that is supposed to be $470,000. Beg your indulgence for a moment while I clarify the exact number, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Chair, thank you for your indulgence. That is 470,000 exactly. So the number 214,000 is incorrect. The correct number is 470,000.
You're referring to the 13-14 column. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through to the Minister, I notice that the
Mr. Miller, for the record, before you ask the question, let me state the title of the appropriation. I don't think I got a chance to do that before Mr. Pandon sought to make the correction. NGS 74, preservation of natural environments and places of historic significance, for $620,000 on page 178. Are there any questions? Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Miller goes,
Yes.
is there something wrong with this one too, compared with the AP&E? For, Mr. Chairman, 178, sir.
I think
Versus
Mr.
4.
Pannon pointed that out. It is 620,000 budgeted, 14-15, and then the 13-14 forecast should be $470,000 as opposed to the $214,089 that's printed there in the document. So that was the
So
correction.
the
Mr.
214 should be 470.
470,000,
Okay.
even.
Well, then there's another thing. The 766, where does that come from on page 474, sir? Of the purchase agreement.
Purchase agreement, yeah. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, that number is incorrect as well.
Can we take a quick?
That number should be the 620
Can we take a
as well.
can we take a quick 5-minute break, and I'll ask the CFO and the Minister and the Chief Officer for the Ministry of Financial Services to go through whatever's left and just double check that all the figures are correct, so we can correct them one time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies.